are over 7,000 homeless people in the Lone Star State. That's according to a 2022 study from the Texas Homeless Network. But here in East Texas, the population hasn't shrunk since the passing of SB 1925.
That law was passed in 2021 with a goal of shrinking the homeless population across the state. Here in East Texas, advocates say the homeless population is the same 2 years later. Our Jesus Martinez shares how those advocates are helping our homeless population.
Texas is supposed to be the place where people come to build a future. Big skies, big cities, big jobs, big promises. But here's the question nobody wants to answer out loud. How can a state that grows so fast still leave tens of thousands with nowhere safe to sleep? Imagine it's late at night. The skyline is glowing. The highways are humming. And beneath an overpass just a few feet below, all that light, someone is wrapped in a thin blanket, trying to stay warm while the wind moves through concrete like it owns the place. A mother is counting the hours until morning. A father is staring at a house he used to live in, parked across the street so he can still feel close to his child. Someone else is healing from an injury and doesn't know if the next cold night will be harder than the last. And in 2026, new rules are taking effect, rules meant to respond to what Texas is facing, but also raising hard questions about what help really looks like.
This behind me is Tent City in Tyler. It's along Valentine Street in Northeast Tyler. And for many of people here, this is the only home they have. But many community members are rallying behind them to get them off the streets. And a message people are saying, it's friends helping friends.
When you're already at your breaking point. So I want to ask you something directly. If you lost your home tomorrow, would you know where to go? Would you know how to get help without a safe place to rest, shower, or store your documents? And do you think new rules can solve this if the housing isn't there? Stay with us to the end, because this story isn't just about crisis. It's about people, and it's about what actually works when a community decides not to turn away. Welcome to Homeless US News. On this channel, we tell real stories from across America with respect and responsibility. We don't celebrate suffering. We don't dehumanize people, and we don't treat hardship like entertainment. We focus on what's happening, why it's happening, and what solutions can restore dignity and stability. Because homelessness is not a type of person. It's what can happen when rent rises faster than wages, when health breaks down, when support systems fail, or when one unexpected moment becomes a long fall. Today's episode, Texas 2026, a state of extraordinary growth and extraordinary pressure, where more than 27,000 people are experiencing homelessness, according to commonly cited statewide estimates. This story is organized into 6 parts, followed by a meaningful outro. And through every part, we're going to hold on to one truth. Behind every number is a human being trying to make it to tomorrow.
Tyler definitely has one of the larger homeless populations comparative to other cities in East Texas especially.
More information on how to help the homeless community in East Texas. In Tyler, Jesus Martinez, CBS 19.
Part 1. To Texas's, the light above and the shadow below. Texas has a certain energy that's hard to describe until you've felt it. Morning sun over wide roads. Cities that never seem to stop building. Glass towers rising like declarations of confidence. Houston shines with business and industry. Austin pulses with creativity and tech. Dallas expands like it's racing the horizon. San Antonio carries history, culture, and resilience. And yet, when the day ends, another Texas appears. It's not the Texas of brochures and billboards. It's the Texas under bridges, near service roads, behind shopping centers, and in the quiet corners where people try to stay out of sight. Not because they're ashamed of existing, but because attention can bring trouble. Tents appear where the ground is flattest. Sleeping bags line up beside concrete walls because walls block the wind. Old mattresses show up in places that were never meant for living, because even a thin layer between a body and pavement can matter. And here is what makes it emotionally difficult. Sometimes the distance between the Texas dream and Texas survival is not miles. It's steps. One turn off a bright street. One block behind a busy store. One exit ramp where people can disappear from view. In this episode, we hear from a father who says something that stays with you. Even though he's homeless, he still wants to take care of his son. He explains that he parked in a lot right across from a house where his family still lives because he wanted to remain close. He wanted to watch over his child. He wanted to feel like a protector, even if he didn't have a roof. And that detail is important because it breaks a common myth. People assume homelessness means a person has no life, no family, no love, no role. But many people living outside still have someone they care about deeply. They're still trying to be a parent, still trying to be a son or daughter, still trying to be someone worth trusting again. Texas is not only tense, it's relationships under strain. It's families trying not to break. It's the emotional weight of being close to what you lost, but unable to return. So the first truth of Texas in 2026 is this: the state can be booming and hurting at the same time. The towers can rise while people sleep beneath them. And the contrast is not a mystery, it's a warning. Because when life gets this tight for thousands, the question becomes, who's one bad month away? Part 2. The current picture in 2026. 27,000 plus and new rules taking effect. Now let's zoom out and look at the big picture. Across Texas, more than 27,000 people are experiencing homelessness. And in major metro areas, especially places like Houston, Austin, Dallas, and San Antonio, the visibility has grown. People sleep outdoors because shelters fill fast. Some avoid shelters because of overcrowding, stress, or fear of losing their belongings. Some are working but cannot catch up with rent. Some are recovering from health issues. Some are living in vehicles. Some are moving between temporary spaces that never become stable. In a state that once held a reputation for affordability, the pressure has shifted. Rents and living costs have climbed in many areas. Growth brings opportunity, but it also brings competition for housing, especially housing that regular working people can actually afford. And in 2026, new rules are taking effect. The goal, according to supporters, is to reduce harm, improve safety, and connect people with services. But the concern from critics is just as real. Rules can move people, but rules cannot manufacture housing. Rules can create consequences, but consequences are not the same as support. Rules can promise treatment, but treatment has to be accessible, consistent, and humane to work. Some new approaches focus on stronger intervention, people with severe mental health conditions that limit insight and decision-making. The intention is often described as helping people who cannot recognize how much danger they're in. That intention may come from a place of urgency, because communities are watching people suffer in public, and emergency systems are overwhelmed. But the question remains, if services are limited, what happens after the mandate? If housing is scarce, where do people go when they're discharged? If someone is stabilized for a moment, but released back into instability, does the cycle truly break? Texas is wrestling with a painful reality. People want safer streets. People want fewer deaths. People want fewer camps under bridges. People want fewer families falling apart. But you cannot enforce your way out of a housing shortage. So in 2026, Texas stands at a crossroads. Will new rules become bridges to stability? Or will they become a revolving door that makes people feel punished for being poor? That depends on what Texas does next, especially in the areas that matter most: daily life, health support, and housing supply. And that brings us to the hardest part to describe the everyday reality. Part 3. The layers of daily hardship. WHAT life outside really means in Texas. Homelessness is not just the absence of a roof. It's the presence of constant stress. In Texas, that stress changes with the season. People think of Texas as heat, and yes, the heat can be brutal. But cold in Texas can be dangerous too, because many people aren't prepared for sudden drops in temperature. And shelter capacity doesn't magically expand overnight. When winter nights arrive, the wind becomes personal. It finds every gap in clothing. It cuts through thin blankets, and it makes sleep feel like a fight instead of rest. But even before weather, there's the daily system of survival. Where do you use a restroom? Where do you get clean water? Where do you charge your phone? Where do you keep your documents safe? Where do you go if you're sick? Where do you sleep without being told to move? For people living outside, every day becomes a chain of decisions. If you walk to get food, you leave your camp vulnerable. If you carry everything, your body breaks down faster. If you keep your phone, you risk it being stolen. If you lose your ID, everything gets harder. And in Texas, space is wide but help can still be far. If a shelter is across town and you don't have reliable transportation, that distance becomes a wall. If you have to show up at a certain hour but you're exhausted from poor sleep, you may miss the window. If you have a health condition, standing in long lines can feel impossible. Now add the emotional weight. Many people living outside are carrying grief, trauma, or depression. And when you're dealing with mental strain, simple steps stop feeling simple. The city sees tents, but the tent is only the surface. Underneath the surface is a human nervous system stuck in survival mode, day after day. So when people ask, why don't they just fix their life? They're missing the point. You can't rebuild a life while your body is constantly bracing for the next crisis. And yet despite all this, people still show love. That father watching the house across the street, that's love. That mother protecting her child through cold nights, that's love. That whispered prayer that tomorrow will be different, that's love. Texas isn't only hardship, Texas is endurance. And now we have to talk about one of the deepest fractures inside this crisis: health and substance dependence, because it's where the system often fails people the hardest. Part 4, Health and Substance Dependence, the tightening loop and the shortage of exits. In homelessness conversations, people often speak in extremes. They either blame people completely, or they remove all responsibility completely. But real life is more complex. In Texas, many unhoused residents struggle with substance dependence and mental health challenges. And when support is scarce, people turn to coping methods that bring short relief and long consequences. The important thing to understand is this: for many, it's not about chasing a good time. It's about trying to survive emotional pain, physical pain, withdrawal, exhaustion, and isolation. The street is stressful, and stress is a fuel. When you're cold, hungry, ashamed, and unsafe, the brain searches for any off switch, and the street offers substances that are often powerful and risky. Now at a critical problem, treatment access is limited. Even when someone wants help, the next steps can be blocked by waitlists, distance, paperwork, or lack of consistent care. And when you're living outside, consistency is hard. One missed appointment can reset the process. One stolen phone can cut you off from contact. One forced relocation can make you lose track of the plan. So people end up in a loop. They used to cope. They suffer consequences. They try to stop. They can't access stable help. They relapse to cope again. And then society points at the loop and says, see, they don't want to change. But wanting to change is not enough if the exits are locked. This is why the most effective solutions connect housing and recovery. Because stable housing reduces stress. Stable housing makes appointments possible. Stable housing makes medication storage possible. Stable housing gives the nervous system room to calm down. And when someone's mind and body calm down, they can finally do the work of rebuilding. There's also a second layer here: mental health conditions that become visible in public spaces. Cities often respond with enforcement because they don't know what else to do. But if the only tool is enforcement, you don't solve a health issue, you just relocate it. Texas in 2026 needs more doors, more treatment capacity, more mental health care, more outreach teams with follow-up, more supportive housing for people with complex needs. Because new rules without new resources is not a solution. It's just movement. And that leads us to a painful topic that must be handled with care: the vulnerability that comes with living outside and the hard trade-offs people are pushed into. Part 5: Hidden pain and impossible trade-offs when survival replaces choice. When someone has no safe place to sleep, choice becomes a complicated word. People do what they can to stay alive. They look for warmth. They look for protection. They look for somewhere they won't be bothered. And in that vulnerability, exploitation becomes more likely. Advocates and outreach workers have long warned about how homelessness increases risk, especially for women, youth, and anyone living alone. When a person has nowhere to go, they can be pressured, manipulated, or harmed by people who see vulnerability as opportunity. We need to say this clearly and respectfully. No one should have to trade their dignity for a night of safety. No one should have to accept exploitation to survive. No one should have to live in fear because housing is out of reach. This is why safe shelter matters so much, not only for comfort, but for protection. Now, this crisis also shows up in family stories, especially around holidays. One man describes a moment from years ago that still haunts him. A time when he made choices he regrets deeply. A time when substances and depression took control of his priorities. A time when he lost trust that mattered most. And when you hear a story like that, you can feel two things at once: the harm and the regret. But the point of sharing regret is not to shame someone into the ground. The point is to ask a bigger question. What support could have prevented that moment? What intervention could have reached the person earlier before they lost everything? What would it take for someone to truly rebuild trust and return to their family? Because when people fall, the whole community feels it. Kids feel it. Partners feel it. Parents feel it. Neighborhoods feel it. Homelessness is not isolated suffering. It spreads outward. And if Texas wants fewer tragic stories, it must invest in prevention and recovery, not only enforcement. Because when people say, "This is everywhere now," they're not only describing tense, they're describing the feeling that something is breaking in the social contract. And that takes us to the ripple effects and the solutions that can actually reduce them. Part 6. Ripple Effects and Real Solutions. What Texas can do that actually works. Homelessness affects entire communities. Businesses see fewer visitors in areas where the crisis is visible, not because unhoused people are the problem, but because the public feels uncertain and the system looks unmanaged. Emergency services get overwhelmed. Hospitals absorb costs that could have been reduced through stable housing and routine care. Cleanup becomes recurring because moving camps doesn't end homelessness, it just moves it. Families feel tension. Parents struggle to explain to children why someone sleeps outside. And sometimes, people respond with avoidance instead of compassion, because avoidance feels easier than feeling helpless. But here's the truth: Texas is not helpless. There are solutions that work, especially when they're combined instead of isolated. One, housing first pathways. Not housing only. Housing first, meaning stable housing, becomes the foundation, while support services follow and continue. 2, more affordable housing supply. Texas has to build and preserve housing that regular working people can afford. Not just luxury growth, not just high-end units. A state can't claim prosperity while running a housing shortage. That pushes working families into the street. 3, stronger outreach and follow-up. Outreach that meets people where they are, builds trust, and stays consistent. Not one conversation, then disappear. For treatment and mental health care that is accessible. Care with capacity, follow through, and dignity. Because a person can't recover while living inside constant survival stress. 5, safe shelter that doesn't punish people for being human. Shelter that is truly safe, calm, and designed to stabilize, not just contain. 6, prevention. Rental assistance, mediation, and emergency support for families on the edge, because preventing homelessness is often less costly and less painful than trying to fix it after everything collapses. And this is where the community matters too. You may not be able to build housing yourself, but you can help in real ways. Support local shelters and outreach groups. Donate supplies through trusted organizations. Volunteer for meal programs or distribution events. Advocate for affordable housing policy locally. And most importantly, treat people with dignity in public. A simple conversation can matter. A respectful tone can matter. A moment of recognition can pull someone back from the edge. Because what breaks people is not only hunger or cold, it's the feeling of being erased. Texas does not need more cruelty. It needs more structure, more resources, and more humanity. And that brings us to the ending, where we ask what kind of Texas we want it to be. Outro, the question Texas can't avoid in 2026. Texas moves fast, but when you slow down, when you look beneath the overpasses and behind the bright streets, you see people living in a different timeline. A timeline measured by weather, by safety, by the next meal, by the next chance. More than 27,000 people across the state are living without stable housing. That's not a statistic to scroll past. That is 27,000 human stories. A father trying to stay close to his son. A mother trying to keep her child calm in a world that isn't calm. A person trying to heal, trying to recover, trying to rebuild identity and purpose. And in 2026, as new rules take effect, Texas faces a test. Will the state choose solutions that restore dignity, or will it rely on pressure without enough support behind it? Because the truth is simple. A city can raise towers that touch the sky, but its real strength is measured by how it treats people at street level. So here are the questions I want to leave you with. What do you think Texas needs most right now? More housing, more treatment access, or better prevention so people don't fall into homelessness in the first place? Do you believe new rules can help if resources don't grow at the same time? And what small act of compassion would you take this week that would actually make someone feel seen? If this story moved you, don't let it fade when the video ends. Like this video so more people find it. Comment your thoughts because your voice shapes the conversation. And subscribe to Homeless US News so we can keep bringing real stories into the light stories that remind the world that no one should be left behind. We may not change everything overnight, but we can begin with something real. A gaze that doesn't turn away. A hand that helps. A community that refuses to pretend people don't exist. This is Homeless US News. Thank you for watching. And wherever you are, choose humanity.